I'm going to take you in a little journey. For me, sustainable poultry production hinges around two key factors. One, brooding. Brooding is the process where you take care of the chicken from a baby, right? Especially in the first 14 days, you'll make sure you take very good care of it by providing artificial light, heat, warmth, and of course, feed and water. All right? So that's the first one, brooding. The next pillar for sustainable poultry production is post-hatch feeding. What is post-hatch feeding? After the chicken is hatched from the egg, there is a process that you must follow. But let's talk about brooding. Those of you who had the experience to deal with the layers that came in, I would assume that before the chickens came, there would have been some preparation. Am I correct? So tell me what the preparation was like before the chickens came. What did you do to prepare for the chickens?
You had to clean all the fall coop first.
Right.
Then you have to put sawdust.
Okay.
Then thing for the water and then thing for the feeder. Then you make sure the light working for incubation.
Right, well, good start. At least a good effort. Right, so when chickens are born or they hatch from the egg, they do not have feathers. What you see on them is some little thing like fur, right? And along with that, there is something called the thermoregulatory system. In other words, simple put, is the ability of the chicken to relate to heat, at least to heat and cold, all right? But how do you know chickens don't have pores like us, all right? So chickens cannot sweat. So when the day is very hot, what do you observe in the pen? How do the chickens behave? What action do you see in terms of their breeding? You usually see them like that. Also, open their mouth, right? That's what I get rid of. They pant, right? So we call it panting. So because chickens cannot sweat, and because these baby chickens do not have the ability to relate to hot and to relate to cold, there is a particular temperature that they must be maintained at for the first 14 days. And it has to be anything about 97 degrees Fahrenheit or just around 21 degrees Celsius. All right? Now at that temperature, they will remain calm and cool. Now, if when the chickens come, you do not disinfect, clean, wash down, prepare the waterers, prepare the feeders. So this is a feeder. This is also a feeder. So we're dealing with the age of the chicken, right? So for the day-old chicken that just arrived, we use these baby feeders, okay? And when they get much bigger, we use this one or this one. Now, I don't like to use this one. I prefer to use this one. And it's simple because this is hard to regulate. It's almost fixed. They usually have more wastage in a feeder like this, right? The feed is more controlled in this. Like you must clean and disinfect the pen, the waterers, the feeders, everything. Why do you want to clean and disinfect? Why do you want to keep a clean environment? Anybody? You want to avoid germs, right? Okay, so the chickens, when they're very young, they're very susceptible to catch disease. So you want to create an almost perfect environment. All right? Now, after you disinfect and you do all what you do, you have to make sure, remember, when the chicken come from the hatchery, they come from a particular temperature. And we want to maintain that same temperature until 14 days. We have a little challenge in this. Because we do not have control of what happens when the chicken comes from the hatchery in Barbados, right? So they come from the hatchery in a nice warm environment, and they go on the plane, and the plane is usually air conditioned, right? So that's a change in environment. And they come and they put them on the airport, and there is a change again in the environment, and then you have to bring them to your pen to our next environment again. So all these changes in environmental factors can affect the chicken in the sense that it can cause stress, all right? And I don't know if you ever experience stress, but sometimes when you have stress, sometimes your head hurting you, you're feeling tired, you don't want to eat, you're feeling lonely, right? You want to be in a corner for yourself, and there's a similar thing that's happening to the chicken, all right? So to avoid that, you want to make sure that you maintain that temperature, right? So brooding process, you cannot escape the brooding process. So how do you brood? So we want to ensure that the entire pen is covered. Now this pen, notice all around the pen, we have wire mesh. Yes, just observe it. Now even the wire mesh size is important, right? Wire mesh should not be anything less than 3/4. You want to remember the first 14 days. You want to ensure that there is a warm condition inside the pen. So you will take things like, whether it's fine bar, cloth, or whatever it is, and you will borrow all the areas that are exposed. So all where we have the mesh, we will put cloth or bag around it to maintain a nice temperature. Then on the floor, you can either put some newspaper on the floor. So if you operate in a pen like this, with the floor being meshed, it means that even if you bar all around and you do not bar below, cold air will still come up. All right? Right. So after this is done, you want to ensure, now heat is important, because remember, we want to maintain the same temperature that comes from the hatchery. So there is a difference between heat and light. All right? Your chickens for the first 14 days must get heat, because that will help keep the body temperature scale. So we have what we call bulbs. Now this is a regular household bulb, like the old time thing, right? Nowadays we have some fancy bulbs called LED, designed to use less energy, so there's not plenty heat, right? But more light. So when you finish this now, you'll put in your sawdust. So we have a choice: sawdust, we have shavings, and we have shredding paper. I would advise for the first 14 days, because this is really critical to where you have the first run. Because your sawdust or shavings or baggers, if you use baggers, there's some use baggers too, which I really don't recommend, should not be more than 4 to 6 inches thick. And that, of course, must be in keeping with the amount of birds that you have inside the pen. Alright? So 4 to 6 inches, this is 3 inches. So 4 inches might be from here to here, might be about 4 inches, and 6 might be here. So the sawdust should not be anything less than that. And the reason is that because we have a serious challenge with the quality of feed that we get at Grenada, the feed has a lot of fiber in it. And you know, when you take in a lot of fiber, fiber is roughage, and so it will activate your bubbles, right? So if you notice, the feces from the chicken comes out with a lot of water. So if the sawdust is not thick enough to absorb the water, the pen will soon become very dampy, wet, and that is the perfect condition for bacteria like E. coli and stuff to function. And if your chickens get infected with E. coli, you'll see they come even first with diarrhea, then dysentery, and before you know it, a host of chickens start dying. Alright? So managing the depth of the sawdust is important. Alright? 4 to 6 inches. And so after this would have been accomplished, but not just that too. Because we have a height of 8 inches, if we put 6 inches sawdust, we have a difference of 2 inches. Right? Now we want the chicken to be able to experience the free flow of air blowing right through the pen. And on that note, I want you to note also that the orientation of your pen must always be east to west, direction of the wind flow, and it must never be, your pen must never be flat roof, especially now when we have climate change. Gable roof is always the best because hot air rises, and so it will arise and be above the head of the chicken. Right, so this is a gable roof, and a flat roof is just imagine this is not just a flat thing as a shed. Alright? Okay, so after we put the sawdust, so the sawdust is done, we want to ensure now we install the lights, the heat and the light, right? So if I want light, I would get an electrician to organize and hook up so that provide light. But if I want heat, I would use any of these two bulbs. Now, the ideal bulb is this one. They call this infrared bulb. That is a heat bulb specifically designed to provide heat. But because it's very hard to find, I got this all the way from England. So we would resort to the, what we call the traditional bulb, right? Because they provide a lot of heat. Assuming that this is set up in the pen, the sawdust is there. So this is a feeder, and this is also a feed. This is a waterer, liquid water. So you take it, but before you do this is important to know. Which of the two feed would you feed baby chick? The starter. Why not this one?
Because that one is for them to get fat.
Oh, for to get fat. But I was looking for the next reason. Why wouldn't you use that? It's too big, exact. So again, I would have you to know, you give starter to baby chicks. When they get bigger, you give them grow up, and just before you slaughter, you give finisher. And that is important. Right now, so before we install the feed and the water, so we want to be able to train the chickens to pee, right? And the easiest way to do that is to put the newspaper on the ground, any water. Now that you have the water and the feed, now because we want to introduce the chickens to eating, they may not immediately get accustomed to going into the feed. So we will take some feed and sprinkle it all over the newspaper. Because the first thing the chicken does, or the chickens do when they come, is to just a little. So now this is done before the chickens arrive. You want to make sure 24 to 36 hours before the chicken arrive, you turn on the light. Because you want, now after the chickens arrive, examine them to make sure all chickens are healthy. And a very easy way to know that your chickens are healthy is if you hold the chicken and you turn it on, a healthy chicken immediately would flip back. Alright? And then you examine to make sure that there is no defect in the leg. Because sometimes, because the chicken come from Barbados, we have no idea whether the chickens are vaccinated against major disease. And there is a disease called Gumboro disease, right? That sometimes, have you ever noticed some chickens with spread leg? So it could either be Merrick's or Gumboro, alright? And if it's not vaccinated, then that could show up very easily. I think Gumboro, Merrick's, Newcastle, all are bacterial disease, couple bacteria. Yeah? Alright, so now that the pen is ready, the feed is ready, the water is there, the chicken is introduced. After the chickens have been placed on the floor, you want to stay for at least 1 hour before you leave them and go. The reason being, you want to make sure, and there is a gauge, if the light or the heat is too hot, based on how the bulb is arranged, you will see all of them moving from the middle and going all over in the corners. If the temperature is too low, you will see that they come in a corner and it's like all men trying to get heat from each other, right? That could cause trampling and suffocation. And if for some reason you did not barrel the pen correctly and the cold breeze is coming in, you'll see them again giving you a particular reaction again. They're looking to get heat from each other. But if after you put them down and you see everybody is all over the place having a very good time, they scatter around, then the assumption is the temperature, everybody is okay, you can leave and you can go. But the mistake some farmers make is that when the chickens come, they just put them there until maybe till next day. They look after them. By the time you come, a couple chickens already die. And the reason why they die, it could simply be because of stress and because they are dehydrated. Alright? No, and that's the important thing that you must know. When the chickens arrive, the first thing, though the feed and the water is available, you want to ensure that the first thing they do for the first 2 hours is to drink. You want them to rehydrate. And once they rehydrate, they will feel comfortable. If you go to the store, you will see they sell stress mix. That is for the chickens when they come, and this is artificial, right? And they have super vitamins and all those mixes. Through my own little intervention, I've come up with a nice little formula that I was able to share with a farmer. And today he is very happy he learned that. Now, all what is in this stress mix is what is in my hand. Got it? All what is in this package is in my hand. We're talking about sustainability. We want to use stuff, our resources without depleting, and we want to be able to make sure that it's profitable and it's not harmful to our health. Right? Now, so in this package we have antibiotic, we have glucose, and we have a measure of vitamin C. Vitamin C, glucose, energy, best antibiotic. Yeah? Even for human beings. What I have learned to do, and I actually tried that experiment, I would mix to 5 gallons of water, 3 limes, 5 pounds of brown sugar, and 1 or 2 head of garlic, depending on the size. Now, garlic has a very strange way of acting. There's a very active compound in garlic that is not activated only after 15 minutes. So you will clean the garlic, blend it, and leave it to rest for at least 15 minutes. Then in 5 gallons of water, you would squeeze the lime and dissolve the sugar, and that would be the drinking water available to the chicken when they come from the home. No antibiotics. No artificial source of antibiotics. And if it's not good enough, we have a lot of other stuff around that we don't use. Purple leaf, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, antibiotic. And if it's not good enough, still aloes. I did an experiment using 500 broilers using aloes, and trust me, this is a game changer. So having said all of this, talk about the hatching, we talk about the housing, the environment. Finally, we are in an age of what we call climate change. And if things are changing, it means that we have to now adapt to the times. So we are fast moving to the stage where the chickens that we have now, you would wake up one morning and see chickens with no feathers. Because we are in the tropics, and the birds we get are really temperate birds that have to adapt to a temperate climate. That's why we have all these challenges. Genetic work is being done, genetic improvement and whatnot, to present a bird that is featherless, adaptable to our own environment. That they need to do, taking into consideration the heat tolerance of the bird, but at the same time, fast growth rate, especially for our broilers. 6 to 8 weeks. Because see, these birds that we bring in, they have done a lot of genetics on them in terms of improving growth rate, feed efficiency, so it comes into maturity most fastly. The environment is important in terms of we're trying to look for a feed that fit our tropical environment. Tropic, where we have a lot of sunshine. In a temperate region, they have four different climatic conditions or seasons: autumn, spring, summer, and winter. In the tropics, we have only rain and sunshine. Well, things are changing.
So we're talking about the temperatures then?
The temperature, right, yeah. So I'm saying the genetics of the bird is something that they're working on. In fact, the last thing I heard was that they were trying to give a bird with no feathers and produce 6 wings.
What do you mean by genetic?
The genetic is the makeup of the bird. 6 wings, and the reason why they want 6 wings is because wings is one of the fastest seller in terms of chicken consumption. So again, it's from a business approach. Then how do you dispose of your waste? That is important because you don't want any nuisance, especially if you're in a neighborhood, people smelling, poor mess, and they get knocked up, they will call the Ministry of Health. And so you want to be able to make sure that you have a nice little place in the corner where you could actually take out all your litter, dump it, have, like a kind of compost environment, and get that same litter that you could incorporate in your garden for your corn and your cabbage and stuff, because we know poultry litter is very high in ammonia, right? Very good for leafy crops. I hope what I've shared with you will have learned something from it and you are ready to go. Thank you very much.